So I never really paid that much attention to WastewaterSCAN prior to the BioBot contract ending and Verily taking over the contract. And initially, from my understanding, I thought that the data presented here was a 5-day rolling average of each point, or a moving average. But because I've been getting annoyed with the website, I finally started reading things, and I noticed, oh no, it's not a moving average, it's a 5-day trimmed average. So what does that mean? Well, first, it explains a lot. It explains why the data is going up and then it all of a sudden gets suppressed weeks after. And by suppressed, I mean the data goes down. The values go down. So first, what is a trimmed average? Well, their trimmed average shows 5 consecutive samples, eliminating the maximum and minimum of the 5 samples and then taking the mean, which means that for every data point in a moving sequence, 2 are eliminated and aren't included in the data set, which suppresses the data, which artificially lowers it, because you're much more likely to have a significantly high sampling number, a high concentration number, than you are to get a low concentration number. Second, that means you're only using 3 out of 5 data points for each sequence of days, which makes this classified as a 40% reduction, or a 40% trimmed mean, which is something they actually use in financial ebbs and flows, but not for science. This is not typically done. And this is what that looks like. So, for example, you can see that when you have close groupings of data points, it fits pretty well. But then when you start getting some chaos like over here, where you have these really high data points and not very low ones, these ones get eliminated from the moving 5-day average. So for like this point on the graph right here, you would have this point, this point, this point, that point. And so that point would be eliminated, that point would be eliminated, which completely more than 50% reduces the value of this point right here that's plotted on the chart. So that's a suppression of the data of what is actually happening, which is why in science, in typical science and engineering, we actually use a rolling average or a moving average. And let me show you examples of this. So I did a quick Google search to pull out a good trimmed average to show you different changes in percentage trimmed data. So for example, the blue data here, that is the actual data. So this would be an example of like wastewater concentration. So you have the data, and this would be a moving average with no smoothing, it looks like, of all the data. But then you do a 10% trimmed mean, which is the yellow. So you're removing 10% of the data points, and it reduces it dramatically. And then if you do a 30% trimmed, it brings it even down even more. So you're even less sensitive to actual fluctuations and changes. And then for a 5-point moving average, so this would be, instead of a 5-point trimmed average, a 5-point moving average, which is what we do typically in science. This would be an average of 5 data points surrounding each point. Then this is what you would get. See how it's actually a more accurate reflection? So it takes out these extrema at both high and low. So instead of having these little quick jagged oscillations, it smooths the data. So you have a better trend line visualization, but you can tell that it's still very representative of the data. This is what I thought WastewaterSCAN was doing, but this is not what WastewaterSCAN is doing. They're doing something that I don't agree with, which actually very much so biases the data and biases it to a lower scale, to a low side.